Hey everybody, welcome to Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. This is episode number 326 of our YouTube channel and podcast, and I could not be more excited to continue sharing with you guys personal finance topics that I think could be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. Today, we are going to be talking about contributions, and not just contributions to one specific type of account, but contributions to just about any type of account that you can think of, because there are new contribution limits for 2022 that I think we should cover, that I think we should understand before we actually get to 2022, and it is right around the corner. I mean, we are 2 months away. So let's understand a little bit better what our contribution limits are going into 2022, and exactly how much money we can put into some of these accounts that we are using in order to build wealth and save money over the long term. So stick around for a discussion of all that and more in today's episode. Before we get started though, if you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to help you to build a financial plan and keep you accountable to that plan over the long term, then I can do that. Just DM me on any of the major social media sites and tell me that you are interested in financial coaching sessions, and you and I can begin working together, pushing towards your long-term financial goals and ultimately pushing you on towards long-term financial freedom, which is what I hope for every single individual who's watching or listening to this show on a day-to-day basis. Now, you know that, and if you've listened or watched this show at all, right? You know that I like to frame things in terms of the financial action plan, right? Because that is my plan for you as far as your financial life goes, right? That's what I think is the most efficient way to get you from maybe deeply in debt, don't have any money saved, don't have anything going for you financially, to the point where you can build wealth and be financially free and financially successful over the long term. And so I try to frame everything in terms of that plan. And if you don't know what that plan is, then you can go watch all of the videos that I've done on all the different parts of the financial action plan and the financial action plan by itself. I've done a few videos that just kind of reviews the financial action plan itself, talks about what I think you should do. You can go back and look or listen to some of those episodes. But nonetheless, right, I want to frame today in terms of the financial action plan. So when I'm talking about contribution limits, right? I'm talking about the amount of money that you can put in, or that you and your employer can put in, or whatever, the amount of money that can be put in to these different types of accounts that we can invest money into. Where does this fall, right? Where does this matter? Why does this matter, right? Why do I need to know this, right? Am I ever really going to hit some of these contribution limits? That's what some people may think, and then you'd be surprised if you actually do hit some of these limits, but I think it's a lot more possible than you think it is, okay? But let's talk about where this falls. So the financial action plan, quick recap, right? The first part, you're uniquely budgeting. The second part, you are starting a small emergency fund of 1 month's worth of expenses, right? The third part, you start investing in your 401k or 403b or other employer-sponsored retirement accounts if and only if you are offered a match, and only up to whatever that matching amount is, okay? Now that's going to come into play today as well. So you invest up to the match, but no more in that third part. Fourth part, you get out of all consumer debt other than your mortgage. The fifth part, you build up an emergency fund that is 4 to 6 months of household expenses that'll keep you pretty secure given many of life's possible emergencies. And then there is the sixth part, and the sixth part is to invest at least 15% of your income for your future. Now, that's going to be very relevant today as well, okay? But then at the same time, the seventh part, you're simultaneously trying to get your house paid off, your mortgage paid off if you have one, right? And then in the eighth part, I tell you to max everything out. And that's really where this falls into play. Now, I know that's deeper into the financial action plan, but we have to, make sure that we are clear about every single part. I have to make sure that I'm clear about everything that I'm talking about. And that's where this really comes into play. But that doesn't mean it's the only place it can come into play. Depending on your income, depending on the amount of money that you're putting away, this could come into play when you're putting away 15% of your income. This could come into play even when you are just getting your employer match. Now, that's very unlikely in most cases, but based on your income, it could 100% come into play. So let us begin with these employer-sponsored retirement accounts. Okay, that's what I want to talk about first. And when I'm talking about employer-sponsored retirement accounts, I'm talking about 401ks, 403bs, 457bs, right? These different types of accounts that your employer sets up for you, and then you just take advantage of putting money into these accounts, whether it is on a pre-tax or an after-tax basis or a Roth basis. Now, after-tax and Roth sounds very much the same, but it can be a different thing with 401ks and 403bs. I'm not going to get into it today. Okay, that's another topic for another time. But what I want you to know is how much you can actually put into these accounts and then what that amount can turn into over time, right? Because it's one thing to just know that, okay, I can put this much in, skippity-doo, whatever, right? But ultimately, I want you to know how much money that can turn into. And I think you'll be quite shocked as to if you begin early enough, if you make the correct rates of returns over time, right, then you should be able to turn some of these maximum contribution limits into some major change over a long period of time. And we'll get into IRAs and things like that have lower contribution limits that you can still turn into some major amounts over a long period of time. Okay, so let's jump right in. So for a 401k, 403b, your contribution, the amount of money that you can put in 2021, the limit was $19,500 a year. And there you go. You're saying, there's no way I could put in $19,500 a year. I don't care if it went up or not, right? That's a lot of money. Yes, that is a lot of money, right? That's $1,625 per month. But again, if you're in a place where you are investing, let's say, 15% of your income, right? You're saying, okay, I'm investing 15% of my income. Your income could be something, and this is not out of the realm of possibility, right? Your income could be $130,000 a year, and guess what? 15% of your income is $1,625 a month, right? A lot of people make $130,000 a year. That's not anything outrageous, right? Now, some of you making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 may say that is outrageous, but ultimately, it's not anything out of the realm of possibility, okay? Now, $19,500 was the contribution limit in 2021, or is in 2021. In 2022, it is going to be $20,500, so it increased by $1,000. Okay, now that would be 15% of $136,667 approximately income, right? So a little higher income for it to be 15% of it. But ultimately, if you get to the part of the financial action plan where you're trying to max everything out, right, this may be something that you have to turn to. So let's say that you were able to put away this much money, right? Let's say you were putting the monthly amount, which is $1,708.33 per month into your 401k. And let's say you did that over a 30-year period, and you just made 8% on your money over 30 years, right? That ends up turning into $2,546,000 approximately, right? So no slouch whatsoever, right? But let's say you did it over the 30-year period, and you made 10% a year. Well, that tacks on an extra $1.3 million. That's $3.861 million after 30 years. But then let's say 10% over 40 years, right? That you started early and you invested over a long period of time. That's over $10.8 million. So maxing out your 401k can be an absolutely huge thing. And if you could take advantage of something like that, yes, it can be huge. Now, is it the best thing for you in all cases to just max out your 401k? My argument would be no, right? And especially no based on costs, especially no based on the type of 401k that's offered, right? If you don't have Roth options, or maybe you do have Roth options and you've got a high income, right? That can really come into play, because with IRAs, and again, we'll get to IRAs here shortly, right? If you make more than a certain amount, you can't directly invest into a Roth IRA. But if your 401k has Roth options, right, you can make any income under the sun, right? But if you can contribute to the 401k, you can also contribute to the Roth 401k, right? So you can get a lot more of tax-free money over time. So that $10 million or that $3 or whatever in between value ends up happening, $4, $5, $6 million that you end up accumulating can be either pre-tax or it can be Roth or whatever, right? Again, these are just estimates. These are not actual values that you'll end up with. This is just telling you, kind of giving you an idea of the range that you can come up with based on rates of return and how long you're investing, given these different contribution limits. Okay, so that's just putting money into the 401k, 403b, whatever. Now, if you're over age 50, okay, this is a big deal, right? If you're over age 50, you can do what's called catch-up contributions, okay? So that amount that we were already putting in, we can add extra to it, okay? So you can add an extra $6,500 annually to that amount. So just for a little clarity, in 2021, the total IRA contribution that you could put in was $6,000 a year. Well, with a catch-up contribution on a 401k, 403b, you can add an extra $6,500 on top of the $20,500 you could already put in to the account by yourself. And now, when you're 50 plus, right, you can put up to $27,000 a year into your 401k, 403b, whatever. Now, again, I know this sounds ridiculous. It sounds like an amount of money that nobody can make, right? But again, by the time you're 50, who knows the amount of money that you'll be making? Maybe you have a quite lucrative career, right? And let's say you're just investing 15% of your income, okay? Let's say it's that simple, okay? 15% of your income being this monthly amount, which would be $2,250 to get to the $27,000 a year, right? That would be an annual income of $180,000 a year. Again, nothing that is just out of the realm of possibility. There are plenty of people in the world, and plenty of couples especially, that make $180,000 a year. So getting to this value is not out of the realm of possibility. And especially if you work your way up over time in income and just build to the point where you're 50 plus, and $180,000 a year is not anything out of the realm of us being able to do it. Now, these next values are going to seem a little crazy. And it's the values that a lot of people don't look at when it comes to 401ks and 403bs. They typically look at those contribution limits. And again, that catch-up limit, that's staying the same. That $6,500 extra was also the same in 2021, right? But now it's being tacked on to a larger number. It's being tacked on to the $20,500 instead of the $19,500 that it was in 2021. Now, in 2022, the total contribution that can be put into a 401k or 403b is increasing as well. Now, when I say total contribution, right, what I'm getting at here is the contribution that you can make and the contribution that your employer can make, right? And your employer can match as much as they want to on your 401k, 403b, whatever, right? And they can also put money in as not necessarily bonuses, but they can give you, the profit sharing or whatever into your 401k. But the total contribution that can be put into your 401k, if you are less than 50 years old, right, is $61,000 in 2022, where it was $58,000 in 2021. Okay, and then if you are 50 plus, right, you just tack on the $6,500 onto those values. So $67,500 for 50 plus, and the $64,500 for 50 plus in 2021, right? So ultimately, right, you see this change of $3,000 in both of these cases, whether you are under the age of 50 or 50 plus, when it comes to the total contribution that can be made to the 401k or 403b. Now, if you want an idea of exactly what this looks like, right? So you want to look at a situation where somebody gets the total 401k contribution every single year from here on out, right? That's $61,000 a year, right? On a monthly basis, that means $5,083.33 is going into your 401k, right? If you invest that at 8% for 30 years, right? Given that you're putting that much in monthly, right? That's going to give you $7.575 million. Okay. So no slouch there. And then let's say you're making 10% over 30 years. That's $11.49 million. But let's say you invest over 40 years and you make 10% a year over that 40-year period. That is $32.147 million. So putting the total amount into your 401k. Now, obviously, you can only put up to the employee contribution maximum, the contribution limit we were talking about earlier. But if this much is getting put into your 401k, you can really accumulate a lot of money over a long period of time, okay? Now, that's the 401k and 403b. What about the 457? Well, the good news is this is very, very simple, right? The 457 plan, which some people have, it's less common than the 401k and 403b. But if you have a 457 plan for 2022, it's going to be the exact same as the 401k or 403b, $20,500 versus the $19,500 that it was in 2021. So no big deal there, okay? Small change. Now, let's get to IRAs, okay? So let's start with the traditional and Roth IRAs. If you know the contribution limits right now, the contribution limits currently in 2021 are $6,000 per person per year, right? Well, that's not going to change in 2022, which I thought was pretty interesting, right? And the reason that I think that's interesting is because the cost of living is rising. They're increasing the 401k and 403b contributions, right? But they are keeping these contribution limits the same. And I can't tell you why, right? The 401k contribution is increasing by a little more than 5%, but no contribution increase to an IRA. So, it's kind of making a little more of the case for the 401k, even though there are still some distinct advantages to the IRAs. The 401k, there's more money that you can put in. Okay. There's, more tax advantage money that you can put in, which is a huge thing, right? So traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, the contribution that you can put in is going to be still $6,000 per person per year. Now, if you don't already know this, you don't know the simple math, that's $500 a month. Okay. And if you put away $500 a month, which seems far more doable for most people, right? So let's think about that. $500 a month at 8% for 30 years, you're going to end up with $745,000, right? Which is a good little nest egg, right? It's at least a very good start towards something, right? Then if you do that at 10% over 30 years, that's $1.13 million. But if you do it at 10% over 40 years, right, that's $3.16 million. Okay, so again, that's a very fair amount of money that you can accumulate over time by just putting in the maximum for the IRAs, not the 401ks or other types of accounts that you may have. Okay, now again, that amount of money can be traditional IRAs or Roth IRAs. They do have the same contribution limits, but obviously the impact later on is different because when you go to take that money out of a traditional IRA, you will pay taxes on every dime that you take out of the traditional IRA. But if you take that money out of a Roth IRA, that money is tax-free. The growth is tax-free, and you don't have to worry about any of that. Now, what about the catch-ups, right? We said that there was a catch-up on the 401k and 403b contributions. What about the IRA? Well, given that the contribution limit is staying the same, the catch-up contribution is also staying the same. You could put an extra $1,000 per year per person if you are age 50 plus, okay? So that makes the monthly contribution into $583.33 once you are 50 plus, right? And you can continue to do that. With the traditional IRA, you can only continue to do that unto age 72, conditional upon you continuing to work and make an income, earn an income. With the Roth IRA, you can continue to do so as long as you would like, as long as you continue to earn an income as well. Okay. So those are your traditional and Roth IRA rules. What about, just real quick, the Sep IRA, right? Well, the Sep IRA is going to look very, very similar to the 401k or 403b for the individual who is under the age of 50. Now, this Sep IRA, for those of us who don't know, the Sep IRA, it does differ a fair amount from normal IRAs, but it looks a little bit more like the 401k. So what is exactly this Sep IRA? Sep stands for Simplified Employee Pension, right? And all it is a traditional IRA for self-employed people and small business owners. Okay, so basically what it is just for business owners, right? The contributions are tax deductible. Investments grow tax deferred until retirement when the distributions are taxed as income. Okay, so ultimately you are putting in money from your business. So it's as if you are getting some match, but obviously it's from the money that you make in your business. Okay, so for a Sep IRA for 2022, you can put up to $61,000 into an account for yourself, right? And that was $58,000 in the year 2021, right? So there's a $3,000 increase there. So a little benefit for Sep IRA individuals. Now, just like with the 401k, that can turn into a similar amount of money, right? Very large amount of money. If 10% over 40 years can be $32 million, right? So those maximums can turn into a lot. But again, that is also a lot of money to be putting away, especially a lot of your own money to be putting away there, but can be done nonetheless. Then, what about simple IRAs or simple 401ks? Right? Now, these also are a little different. Not going to get into them too much, right? But there has been an increase in simple IRA contributions from $13,500 in 2021 to $14,000 in 2022. So a $500 change that we see there. So in 2022, that is $1,166.67 per month. Right, you invest that at 8% for 30 years, that's $1.738 million. 10% for 30 years, that is $2.637 million. And then at 10% over 40 years, that is $7.378 million, right? So that can turn into quite a bit in and of itself. So those are the major retirement accounts, right? The major accounts that we put money away in a tax-advantaged manner for our retirements. Now, what about the HSA or the FSA, the flexible spending, right? These also have rules. Now, we know with the HSA, it is triple tax advantaged, meaning that you get a tax break with the money that you put in, which, that's just a tax deduction, right? It decreases your taxable income by the amount that you put in. Okay, so we get a tax deduction for the amount that we put in. It grows tax-free, and then we can use it. We can take money out. We can withdraw money tax-free if used for qualified medical expenses. And then if we hold it to age 65, we can use it for whatever we'd like. But it is more like a traditional IRA. At that point, we have to pay income tax on the money that we take out. Okay, so the HSA, very strong in tax advantage, but how much money can we put in? Well, for an individual, right? So for a single high deductible healthcare plan, not for a family, for a single person. Right? In 2021, you could put in $3,600 per person per year, right? In 2022, they're just increasing that by $50. It's going to be $3,650. Now, for a family high deductible healthcare plan, right, where you have an HSA, a family HSA, it went from $7,200 in 2021, which is just double the single limit. And then in 2022, it's $7,300, which again will be double the single limit, which I've always thought was a bit strange because who knows how many people are in that family, and yet we're just doubling the single limit. Whatever, though, right? So there's a $100 change in the family HSA contribution limit. And then what about the flexible spending? Flexible spending doesn't have the same tax advantages that the HSA has, but in the same way can be used for qualified medical expenses, right? The 2021 limit was $2,750 annually, but the 2022 limit will be $2,850. So again, $1,000 increase there. So those amounts are not insignificant, but they are, small increases relative to what we see with the 401k, 403b, all those things. Now, in hindsight, right, now that we can look back and understand what these numbers are based on, the 401k, 403b increases kind of make sense, right? If the cost of living is increasing and numbers are coming in 5+%, whatever, you can argue whatever amount you want to when it comes to inflation, right? We know that Social Security increased by over 5% for the 2022 amounts, right? So if that's occurring, then we would also expect that these contributions are also going to increase by a similar amount. Now, why IRA contributions didn't increase, but we did see HSA contributions increased, the Sep IRAs increased, Simple IRAs increased. I don't know, right? I don't work for the IRS. I don't have a clue. I can't tell you what that reasoning is. They just didn't increase. Now, if I could guess, it probably has something to do with this crackdown that's going on with these IRA accounts anyway, right? We've talked about the whole Peter Thiel thing. We've talked about how they're trying to close backdoor IRAs, all those different types of things. And so it may have something to do with that and the fact that they just don't want to go ahead and change these contribution limits when they don't know what other type of legislation and other types of things are going to be passed that is going to crack down on these specific types of accounts. So they figured, hey, let's just leave things the same. That's just conjecture, but that's my thought process there. Now, ultimately, if you can put away these maximums, you're going to be perfectly financially sound over a long period of time. Right? Yeah, doing it for 5 years or 10 years is not going to get you that far, honestly, right? But if we can do it over a 30-year period, a 40-year period, whatever, right? And obviously, these are going to increase over the next 30, 40 years, right? Hopefully, they'll increase substantially over that period of time. If we can keep up with the maximums over that long, then we are no doubt going to be in a good financial place, right? Now, again, like I said earlier, this does not mean that investing in your 401k only is the best way to go. It does not mean that investing in your IRA only is the best way to go. It doesn't, right? I've told you guys before that there's this hierarchy that I follow of accounts, and there's a reason that I follow it, right? The first thing that I ever tell you to do is to take any match that's offered to you. And the reason that I tell you that is because a match it's invaluable, right? It's free money. It's money that you can pick up off the ground without much consequence. All you're having to do is put some money in and they'll just match it. And then that money's yours. Voila, right? So we take the match, any match that we can take in an employer-sponsored account, you take it. Then we go to a Roth IRA because you have investment options, right? You can invest in anything that you would like basically within an IRA. Right? So we go to a Roth IRA because it is tax-free, because we aren't going to have to pay taxes on it later. The growth is tax-free. Then I look at a Roth 401k, right? Again, those have higher contribution limits, and you don't have the income limits that the Roth IRA has. So you go to a Roth 401k. Then I would go to a traditional IRA, traditional 401k. When I'm saying 401k, I'm saying any employer-sponsored retirement accounts, right? And then once I exhaust those tax advantage options in that way, then I may go to just some bridge investing, meaning putting money into just your taxable brokerage account and letting it grow over time and paying any taxes on any realized gains that may come over time. But ultimately, this is what I'm telling you. You take any of these tax-advantaged accounts, invest in them over a long period of time, put lots of money away, and that is going to make you wealthy, right? You can try to play the game as much as you want. You can follow the hierarchy that I just set out as much as you would like, right? But ultimately, what's going to matter when it comes to the amount of money that you have over a long period of time is the amount of money that you put away. Not necessarily the rate of return, even though that does matter. Not necessarily how long you invest, even though that matters even more than the rate of return, right? But the amount of money that you put in just consistently, just continuing to put money in and put money in and put money in, right? That is going to make the difference, right? Because you can invest over a 40-year period, but if you're putting away $25 a month, good luck accumulating anything, right? But if you're investing $1,000 a month over a 40-year period, that's going to make some change, right? That's going to make a big difference in your life. If you're investing more than that, that's going to make a big difference in your life, right? And even if you're investing a few $100s a month over a 40-year period, we've talked about before, that can make a huge difference in your financial life over time, right? You just have to be willing to sacrifice over a long period of time into some of these tax-advantaged accounts, and you will be better off financially. But I think this information is important to know. It's important to know what these contribution limits are, because I think a lot of us either get close to them or some people even surpass them and then get a phone call from the IRS like, hey, we need to figure this out, right? Without knowing. Because especially for the IRA contributions, you could hit those relatively easy, right? And then for some people with 401k contributions, you can hit those relatively easy as well, right? So you just need to be aware, because we don't want to have to go back and make changes with the IRS. That's not a group that you are trying to deal with when it comes to your money, okay? So make sure you get things right the first time, but the real underlying message of this episode is to put money away, do so over a long period of time, and you can build wealth. And these contribution limits are the top of what you can put away at this point. And so I'll push you to get there, right? I'll push you to put away larger and larger amounts, but obviously do so within the bounds of the financial action plan. And then when you get to that portion, that eighth part where we're maxing everything out, then if you can start hitting some of these numbers or getting really close to them, then that would be awesome. But that's what I hope for you. And I hope we can all build wealth and get to some of these maximums over time. And those maximums actually help us to get to where we want to be over the long term. So thanks for watching this video. If you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to help you to build a financial plan and keep you accountable to that plan over the long term, then I can do that. Just DM me on any of the major social media sites and tell me that you are interested in financial coaching sessions, and you and I can begin working together, pushing towards your long-term financial goals and ultimately pushing you on towards long-term financial freedom, which is what I hope for every single individual who's watching or listening to this show on a day-to-day basis. So tune in tomorrow as I continue talking about personal finance topics that I think can be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. So thanks for tuning into this episode of Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. God bless.